So I guess you and I sit here.
Of course, the topic about nature of mind and the sources of my talk, mainly Buddhist text. So therefore, at the beginning, I want to recite one shloka, verse, the salutation to Buddha. That verse wrote by Nagarjuna. Kange tusi yeso ne dawa do jebang be jere dan be chen ne de jebe kwatam ta la cha che lo. Dear brothers and sisters, of course, Chancellor, and my long-time friend, and the Dean, and also long-time my friend, although he no longer as a monk, but sometimes I refer still Bhikshu. So, indeed, I feel great honor talk a large number of people and in the university
campus.
So great honor. Last 2 days, somewhat called flu or cold. So a lot of liquid come from here. And my voice, a little bit unusual, but okay. I think usually my voice, I think a little better than today's voice. Now, originally, lecture about some Buddhist concept, here a bit longer. So at that time, the concerned people arranged this text. Now, since the duration of my lecture shortened, so now I will not go through that text. Now, the topic, nature of mind. Although all major religious traditions carry same message of love, compassion. With that, spirit of forgiveness, tolerance, and also self-discipline. Out of awareness, the negative thing, sort of negative consequences. So knowing that, and some kind of self-discipline. And also in material field, more contentment. As these practice, same in all traditions. So now these loving kindness or compassion, these are mental quality. And also try to reduce anger, hatred, fear, suspicion. These negative destructive emotions, also part of mind. And basically, the joyfulness, pains, these two things are experience or feeling of mind. So basically, all major tradition, and all, of course faith, also part of mind. So all major tradition, carrying message or practice or method to improve mind. Same. But now because of differences, the theistic religion, non-theistic religion, the theistic religion, the emphasis, importance of faith, faith towards Creator, towards God. That is the way of approach. And non-theistic, such as Jainism and Buddhism, and some other ancient Indian traditions, such as Sangha, one part of Sangha philosophy, is non-theistic. So non-theistic's essential idea is something like self-creation. And also the concept of law of causality, cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. So therefore, ultimately, this something like Creator is within ourselves. So then naturally, not this body also important as a basis of the mind. Now, for example, human body is the basis of human mind. With this, with connection with the body, then we can say it's a different mind. Mind of human being, mind of animal, mind of insect, like that. So that, and also the sensorial level sort of consciousness entirely based on the part of the body. Like that. But ultimately, body action, including voice, because of the verbal action, ultimately depend on the motivation. So motivation means mind. So according to the law of causality, things which we want and things which we do not want, all ultimately related with our motivation, our mind. So now, in order to achieve happy life, joyful life, we have to take care about our mind, motivation. Now, in order to overcome, in order to reduce suffering, we have to deal with negative emotion or destructive emotion, which ultimately bring these unwanted things. So therefore, special emphasis in these traditions about mind. Now naturally, logically, when deal with mind, we should have thorough knowledge about mind. Then also, within the what we call mind or consciousness, I don't know. Within that, there are so many different
categories, types.
Different types of mind, thousands. Then all these destructive emotion, the only way to deal these destructive emotion only through mind, not through matters or injection or surgery, not like that, but only through another mind. Now, for example, anger, hatred will not reduce through some drugs or alcohol. Maybe sometimes sleep, maybe. Even if there's a lot of anger, sound sleep may help reduce. The next morning, your anger a little bit smaller. Actually, they basically, all these negative, destructive emotion, they're dealing these destructive emotion in order to reduce. The only way is opposite mind, contradictory mind. First, realize the contradictory sort of mind, then increase that. That's the only way to change or to reduce these negative emotion. So, in other words, in order to reduce the destructive emotion, the only way is to increase these constructive emotions. That's the only way. So therefore, again, we have to know what kind of mind, what kind of thought is ultimately destructive, and what kind of mind or emotion ultimately constructive. So we have to know that. Then, big question, destructive emotion can eliminate or not? Now, this is a big question. In order to find the answer for that question, we have to know the ultimate nature of mind and the basis of all these destructive emotions. Then you get some understanding, the possibility of elimination these destructive emotions. So therefore, in Buddhist text, there quite a lot of information about emotion, about mind. And then also, I think particularly in Tantric teaching, since the Tantric teaching also involve some, physical, usually we call Zaluntigli.
Yeah, some manipulation and application of physiological forces.
So therefore, you see, it mentioned the sort of different level of mind, like grosser level of mind, and more subtle, like that. That mentioned only in Tantric text, in Tantric teaching. For example, just this moment, our sensorial consciousness or mind fully functioning, active. Although simultaneously, the thought also go simultaneously. But sensorial consciousness are much more dominant. Then during dream time, the sensorial consciousness no longer function. Only thought, another level. Then during deep sleep, without dreaming, another level of deeper level of consciousness, of mind. So then also, when at the time of fainting, even stop breathing, another level of deep level of mind. Then at the time of death, all physiology, physical things, now for example, the heart beating stop, then blood circulation in the brain within a short moment cease. Then all the neurons now no longer function. So all grosser level of mind then stop. I think something like human mind then no longer there, stop. But the only indication, we ordinarily we can notice that some people after death, at the time of death, physical level, death, clinically recognize or declare death. But the body remains very fresh. Now one example, my own senior tutor, after death, about next 13 days, his physical, his body remained very fresh. And then recently, one senior,
No, a Tibetan Lama, the former throne holder of Ganden.
I think last year, after he passed away, I think next almost 3 weeks, his body remained fresh. So fortunately, at that time, as soon as I heard that Rinpoche's body still remained fresh, so then I asked one medical center in Dharamsala, since we already kept some mission to check a person who remained in that state. So some simple mission available. So I sent a message to them, and then they sent some people and carried those simple mission and put some wires on the head and like that. So although they very detailed analysis not yet sort of finalized, but seems that after a few days, clinically dead, some weak electric sort of movement.
Signals.
Some
electrical signals were there.
In brain. So it is, they say, very unusual. So that we believe that still that person's innermost subtle mind is still in the body. So some influence in the body. So that is we call most subtle consciousness. So there are many levels. Now here one thing. Now I think I shifted to the Tibetan. Ngamba zhenanglia, tagye tangzhe sa shegare, gembegi, lumudengi, timatagita, longamandengi, tagye tangzhe. Di shenju zane, paji chiwangodu yuwa kadula, gidiglo shegare. Da ine, ngamba kundu nanglia, chisim chamu yina, lumudengi kyawa shegare. 치승 참물이 lumodema도 개미기 시가 오면 다도 차로 치면 계시도 다도가 라고원도 제윤도 개미기 남샤시 다 참여가만 내윤도 에네 개미기 시가 오면 lumodem 코라를 했습니다 시바 다 나게 흉나는 시윤도 치승 참문데 내저게 덮기 개발을 교통을 했어 이니 치승 참무 미게 원래 남의 교통에 매래 사드네인도 디 차바스도가 미기에 로드즈 차디 정신 제주 군도 유여의 링달라 미기에 남도 용내 정신 제주 군도 가사에 제라 아니 동버시 내가불라 미기에 로기야 나래 사실 미기에 로디 라볼루에 나는 것도 믿어가 이네 겨와데 뉴멀 해지기에 로디에 겨와는 교수하시도가 사다 되게 가르치고 있다고 이나 시바 참여관 내용도 개별로 가서 탑식 쓰면 이나 개별로 개퇴하지 미기별로 개퇴하면 되겠지 개발시 되는 거.
So talking about the classical Buddhist sources for understanding the nature of mind, one important source is the Abhidhamma literature. And in the Abhidhamma text, particularly in the Abhidhamma Kosha, which is Treasury of Knowledge by Vasubandhu, when he talks about the death process, and he talks about how the kind of the various moments of consciousness, one give rise to another consciousness, and also the transition from a virtuous state of mind to a neutral and to a non-virtuous state of mind and vice versa. When he was explaining this, in this context, he explains that the moment of consciousness at the time of death can be depending upon different individuals, and at that particular situation, some of them can be a virtuous, some of them can be non-virtuous, and some of them can be simply a neutral state of mind. However, in Asanga's Abhidhamma Samuccaya, another Abhidhamma text, compendium of knowledge, here he says that if you kind of really analyze the moment of consciousness at the point of death, at that very subtle point, the state of mind can neither be virtuous nor non-virtuous. It is beyond that dichotomy of virtue versus non-virtue, but rather it is a completely neutral state of mind. And then another source for the Tibetan understanding of the subtle levels of consciousness is the Vajrayana, the Tantric teachings. And there it is acknowledged that even that subtle moment of consciousness at the point of death, for a yogi, an experienced meditator, it is possible to affect that state of mind from a neutral state to a virtuous state. So the point here is that the destructive states of mind, the non-virtuous states of mind, they can only operate up to a level of consciousness, and beyond which a very subtle the subtle levels of consciousness arises, then these non-virtuous and destructive emotions and thoughts can no longer function. So that suggests that the destructive and non-virtuous mental states are dependent upon there being comparatively a grosser level of consciousness.
So now I feel the complete sort of understanding or explanation about mind. I think we should include the Tantric text.
The Vajrayana perspective. No.
So now, in Guhi Samanza, Tantra text, Sangju Tsuju. Ma Sangju Tsuju ma re, Sangju Gyu Chiri ya Hare. Doi Chao ne, Chiri da kada, Gyu ni Gyun Shi Chao Cha, Gyu ni Gyun Shi Chao Cha, Gyu ni Namba Sumju Tis, Shidan, Ta Tishin Kasa Ruduge. Now I fail to recite the text. I can't remember now. Kind of many Shi Gyu, Tab Gyu, Mitobam, Devi Gyu Sum Shet.
So in one of the Vajrayana texts, known as the Guhyasamaja Tantra, there is an explanation of what is meant by the word Tantra. And Tantra is explained in terms of a continuum. So when we say continuum, what kind of continuum there can be? So it identifies a continuum in the sense of a basic continuum of consciousness.
Gyuni Gyunshi Chawa Chas. Gyuni Namba Sundu Des. Shida Tishinda, the Tabsa Chihari, Shi, Tabi, Mitropam, Debigus.
So, and then it explains the meaning of Tantra, the continuum, in terms of the basic continuum, and the method that one can apply, and then the resultant state that one can achieve from that method.
That actually, the consciousness, the level of consciousness, three categories. One, basis. One, not tackling that mind, another level. The third level, out of dealing with the mind, finally can be completely purified mind. So this also can say the first reality, present reality, and explanation about that, I consider science. And then second, the tackling. Application. That's method. That's philosophy or concept. The third, as a result. Like Four Noble Truths. When Buddha first because the wheel of Dharma, which is start, the Denshim, all of them are child, they were child, Deva Sum Seadigi, Shi Nature. Shi did be in any Langdon Judoki, child Deva. Langdon Judo, Tedachavina, Devu, any Sabashi, Video Shiva, Young Tuya, Sundo.
So this is comparable to understanding the Buddha's first public sermon on the Four Noble Truths. If you look at the Buddha's actual sermon, he presents his teachings on the Four Noble Truths by way of 3 repetitions. In the first stage, he identifies the specific nature of the truths, the truth of suffering, its origin, cessation, and the path that leads to the cessation. And then in the second round of explanation of the Four Noble Truths, then he talks about the functions of each of these, knowledge of each of these truths. So the fact that suffering must be recognized, the origin of suffering must be removed, cessation of the suffering must be actualized, and the path must be cultivated. So this is second round, he explains what needs to be done with that understanding. And then in the third round of repetition, he explains what are the results that one may attain as a result of application of that knowledge. So here we can see that even in the first public sermon, Buddha's teaching on the Four Noble Truths, he presents the teachings in the context of understanding the nature of reality, the first stage. Second is the application of that knowledge in one's daily life and practice. And then the third is the result one will achieve from that path and application.
So usually I make sort of three sort of categories. Distinction of Buddhism. Buddhist science, the first part I consider as Buddhist science. Second, Buddhist concept or Buddhist philosophy. Buddhist concept or philosophy come on the basis of today's reality. So that's Buddhist science. Then Buddhist concept or philosophy. Then Buddhist religion. Because of that, because of possibility to elimination of all negative emotion, then worthwhile start some practice. So here in this text also, the surely, semgi 다들 정신 디셔체 되네 니버디 된지 집에 있는 자네 랑도 죽도 셔체 될 때네 에는 레뷰냐 그게
So in the text that was originally planned to be commented upon, in fact, we read a similar presentation here. So it says that the actual explanation has three sections. The first is how to analyze the fundamental ground of the mind and how to identify the innate primordial state. So that corresponds to understanding the nature of reality. And then searching for the hidden dimension of reality by analyzing how the mind arises, abides, and moves on.
Correct.
So and then so the second one says, having effected the introduction, how to implement that into practice. And then the third one says how the levels of realization and experiences arises on the basis of that practice.
아니 슈드 question 이래.
두.
question 이봐. 다다리. Now, in the past, I think more than 20 years, we had some sort of serious discussion or seminar with scientists. There is some sort of dialogue or discussion, or actually mutual learning. Of course, basically it's four fields: cosmology, neurobiology, and subatomic physics, such as quantum physics, then psychology. So, and quantum physics also is in some similar view. Cosmology, basically same, but then some particular sort of description about world, flat, and in the center, Mount Meru. These are up to date. Of course, the Buddhist text, the different description about cosmology. So therefore,
so in a sense, the Buddhists have a liberty to choose which one they want to take.
Then some of the such as quantum physics, really of the great interest over 2,000 years, sort of what's the Buddhist concept, and modern latest sort of
findings,
scientific sort of
findings,
physicist sort of finding. There are many similarities. Then, in any way, about the physical part, there are many things to learn from modern science to Buddhist. So really worthwhile, listen or study from them. Then the neurobiology, although the Buddhists, particularly in Tantrayana, say mind and energy. So quite interesting, you see, to investigate the relation between emotions and the neurons and these things. But as far as the physical side, the modern science, much more advanced. So very useful to learn from them. But the connection between neurons and the consciousness, mind, still is not very clear. The modern science or psychology, usually they call soft science.
Soft science.
I think very young, very, very young, something like kindergarten. The ancient Indian sort of science of mind seems much advanced. So a lot of information, something useful to modern scientists. So therefore, my scientist sort of friend, they provide that simple equipment to test. So although they, since I think almost 10 years ago, some equipment is put there, but then just we wait, someone who should die. But then, when the equipment available, no one die through such sort of experience. Then when in the past, it's quite a number of occasions, such happen, but then mission not available. So now last year, two things combined now. So in any way, so these things really interesting to the further sort of investigation or acquiring our knowledge through joint effort. It's very good. So now the mind. Now here, since our meeting with scientists about mind, one thing in India, perhaps I think more than 2,000 years, perhaps around 3,000 years, there is some knowledge about sensorial consciousness or mind and yilukasa.
Mental, sensory versus mental experiences.
So in this modern science, this is a savage images and
So in the course of our conversations with scientists, vis-a-vis classical Indian thought, one thing that seems to be clear is that on the part of the Western science and its kind of theoretical traditions, there doesn't seem to be, unlike in the classical Indian context, a clear distinction drawn between sensory level of experiences versus mental level of experiences.
That's very, very important, make distinction. The sensorial consciousness of mind very much related with the body, with the body element.
Body elements.
The mental level, as I mentioned earlier, the grosser level very much related with the body element, but more subtler, more autonomy. And then the motivation strategy,
and also when we talk about the underlying states of mind that motivate behavior, and then we're not talking at the level of sensory level of experience, we're talking at the level of mental level of experience. So therefore, in order to understand the functions and the operations of this mental level of experience, which is really what determine a lot of our experience of happiness and unhappiness and harm and injury and so on, simply focusing our observation and study on the sensory level of experience is not going to be adequate.
Now, since Tibetan Buddhism, actually the pure lineage of Nalanda tradition, it is very clear that because in 8th century, although I think interest about Buddhism since 7th century developed and tried to learn already began, I think. But more sound basis.
Systematic
sort of establishment of Buddhist study or Buddhist practice, 8th century. The person who actually is carrying the main responsibility to teach and also give ordination, that is Shandarakshita. So on the invitation from Emperor, 8th century, Tenzin, two Indian the important gurus come. One, Guru Pema Sambhava, one, Shandarakshita. So the main responsibility, as I mentioned earlier, giving ordination and also give study lessons, mainly carried the Shandarakshita. So this Shandarakshita, very well known, great master, one of great master of Nalanda, and holder of Madhyamika philosophy, and also as the Shandarakshita, great logician. So I think since beginning of
So Nalanda monastic establishment began towards the beginning of the Common Era.
Then Nagarjuna come from that institution, and many other. And among them, the great philosopher as well as great logician come from
lineage.
In that lineage. So this Shandarakshita, philosopher, Madhyamika philosopher, at the same time great logician. His sort of writing available in Tibetan translation shows such a wonderful logician as well as a philosopher. So naturally, the main introducer of Buddha Dharma in Tibet, one of the top scholar or great practitioner or great monk, bhikshu from Nalanda. So naturally, if the teacher, a philosopher or logician, and he wants his student should be that kind, isn't it? Logically. So therefore, I think till now, in Tibetan tradition, basically the Nalanda tradition, very clear. I often is telling people, I myself, when I study our tradition, mainly at the young age, 6, 7 years old, then we have to learn, then already begin learning by heart those root texts. So my own case, at that time, 6, 7 year old, no interest about Buddhism, no knowledge, as my
Richard Blum.
Richard Blum is mentioned the reincarnation of Tenzin Dalai Lama. I don't think. So you see, when I was young and start learning by heart these texts, no interest, great reluctance. My only interest is to play. So therefore, my tutor have to keep one whip. At that time, myself and my elder brother, we both monk, we both studied together. So my tutor kept 2 whips. One whip, ordinary whip, one whip, yellow whip. So that yellow whip should be considered as a holy whip. The yellow holy whip for holy person Dalai Lama. But you can imagine, if that holy whip used, I don't think any holy pain. I think pain is same. So out of fear, I study. I carry these study, these texts. So the point is, all these texts which I learned by heart, and also similar. And my bhikshu, the ex-bhikshu, also you see, all is the same sort of experience. All these root texts wrote by Nalanda masters, Nagarjuna's text, or Aryadeva's text, Arya Asanga, Basubandh, like that. So all originally is wrote by Nalanda master. Of course, meantime, we also study commentary. Among the commentary, many Indian commentary, as well as Tibetan commentary. So we also read these things. But real texts, all come from Nalanda, like that. So therefore, and then these commentary, whenever some important point reach, they always relying on quotation, one of the Indian well-known
Indian
master, like that. So therefore, it is very clear, the Nalanda tradition. Then also, Pema Sambhava there. So he also, I think he take special sort of responsibility to introduce Tantriyana. Although we believe among Tenjur, which text wrote by Indian masters, various Indian masters, which translated into Tibetan, about 200 volumes. Among them, quite a number of tantric texts or commentary wrote by in name of Nagarjuna and also Aryadeva and many others. So therefore, so Tibetan Buddhist tradition, Nalanda lineage, and meantime complete form of Buddhism. That means Pali tradition, all the Vinaya Sutra, original text, the original language is Pali language. Then
so amongst the three collections, scriptural collections known as the three baskets, one is the basket on discipline. So the Tibetan canonical collection, the text on the discipline basket are primarily based on the Pali teachings. So within the two remaining baskets, one on sutra, the collection of discourses, the other is Abhidhamma or higher knowledge. For these, although there might be some specific Pali text, but primarily these were translated into Tibetan from Sanskrit language, Sanskrit sources. For example, in the Tibetan tradition, when we speak of Abhidhamma tradition, we speak of two systems of Abhidhamma, the lower Abhidhamma and the upper Abhidhamma.
So then, in Tibet, since 8th century, complete form of Buddhism, then introduce and start. That usually we call Nganjur Nyingma.
The early translation school.
Then, 9th century, 10th century, 11th century,
so during this period, the establishment of the Buddha Dharma in Tibet went through a turbulent and difficult period of degeneration.
And then Tibetan emperors sort of organized, emperor also then decentralized.
And also, Tibet as a country became splintered into different smaller kingdoms.
Then Sarma,
and then when around the time the Indian master Atisha came to Tibet, so this is in the early part of the 11th century, then what is known as the second phase of dissemination of Buddhism in Tibet occurred, and from this movement emerged other Tibetan traditions such as Kadampa school and the Kagyu school and the Sakya school.
Then later, Gelug tradition also. So all these say a complete form of Buddhism. That means
so each of these lineages embody the complete form of Buddhism, which means that they embody the teachings of all the vehicles, including the Vajrayana teachings as well.
Then Sangak and three Uber yogas Godu Rijik Teba. Then Ma anu Atis, when you took the Tebas, Tebabuko, Susanata, Tebasunga, Chas of this one.
So, to give an example, in the early translation school, the Nyingma tradition, the tradition speaks of 9 yanas or 9 vehicles. And 9 vehicles are identified as the vehicles of the disciple, the self-enlightened ones, Pratyeka Buddhas, and the Bodhisattvas, the 3 external vehicles. And then within the Vajrayana teachings, there are Kriya, the action, Upa Tantra, and Yoga Tantra. So these are another set of teachings. And then finally, you have the... so these are the external tantras or outer tantras. And then you have Maha Anu and Mahatantra and Anutantra and Atitantra. So these are the 3 inner Vajrayana teachings. So we can see that there is a complete recognition of the complete form of Buddhist teachings.
So now the subtle mind is concerned. According Dzogchen, Dzogchen, now here Ma Anu Adi Dzogchen. Suzanata Numa Tenji Give Ribukundu Sambusidata di Nyamni.
So in the Nyingma tradition, particularly from the Dzogchen perspective, the great perfection perspective, then one speaks of the one gives teachings at the level of the pertaining to the subtlemost level of consciousness, which is the innate mind of clear light. And there the focus is primarily on introducing the nature of mind at that level and bringing about the realization of that awareness. So one unique So one unique method in the Great Perfection tradition is based upon drawing distinctions between what the tradition calls basic mind versus primordial awareness or Rigpa awareness. And here the distinction is understood on the basis of those mental states which are more occasional and adventitious and more temporary, and these belong to a basic, they are kind of more of a fluctuating nature. They are characterized as belonging to the basic ordinary state of mind, whereas the Rigpa awareness is characterized as being devoid of that kind of fluctuation. They are ever present, and also they are recognized to be a primordial quality of consciousness. So the distinction is drawn between these two.
Dzogchen le nangsegi Dzogchen semde, Dzogchen longde, and the mengang des. And the menga le chigor, nangor, sangor, and the yangsang lami kwas, sungdoa.
So, and within the Dzogchen teachings, of course, sorry, earlier I forgot that, so the Rigpa awareness that is characterized as being free from fluctuation, ever present and so on, is sometimes also referred to as Samandra Bhadra, all goodness, and with no beginning, no end, and atemporal. So within the Dzogchen teachings, again, there are many different levels of teaching or many different classes of teachings. For example, the 3 primary classes of teachings are known as the cycle of mind teachings, cycle of expanse, and the cycle of instructions. So we see there are many different types of teachings even within the Dzogchen Great Perfection instructions. So this
예상 개바 루브르에다 치마 제딩에다 디 치마 사인도 전에 양상 개바스.
So
퍼싱 슝나리아 시싱 슝나리아 릉신 양대. 근데 학자양들 한명 양대 민의 양대 송도가 So Rengxin Yangde, Tomobone, Rengxin Johnson Yang Deva, Chadi Orba. In Rengxin Johnson Yang Deva, Chadini Luzane, Rengxin Johnson Yang Deva, Mana, Lubur Chijegi Yangde, Yongxing Marva. Or Bitination, Yasang gave the manner, Yangsang gave a Yong Marva.
So this primordial mind, the Rigpa awareness, referred to as, characterized as Samandrabhadra, is in fact described as primordial Buddhahood. And this is a primordial quality of Buddhahood that we all possess. And however, this primordial quality of Buddhahood is obscured by adventitious mental factors, which are the afflictions and the various thought processes. And through practice, when this primordial quality of Buddhahood is removed, when all of these adventitious mental qualities, properties, processes are cleansed, then one becomes reawakened or re-enlightened. So the attainment of enlightenment is referred to as the reawakening or attainment of enlightenment. And this is, in a sense, analogous to an idea in the perfection of wisdom teachings, where the nature of one's mind is referred to as the natural nirvana, and the natural nirvana serves as the basis for the possibility of attaining a nirvana with residue and nirvana without residue, which are constituted by elimination of the afflictive forces. So if there is no natural nirvana, then there is simply no possibility of the attainment of the nirvana, actual nirvana. So the idea is similar. So similarly in the Dzogchen perfection teaching, because of the presence of the primordial Buddhahood in us, it allows the possibility to gain this reawakening, attainment of Buddhahood.
다 태고를 먹고 살디 질 담배 남샤라 태고를 먹고 야래서는 송어 좀 뭐임바 강사 지기 냠손 레베 그도라 태고를 먹고 뒤 차상지 두세냐면 셔가지 근데 송야지 용기 디시라 야오르샤
So
다 데그르스럼노 딩시 고미야 디 년두기 태과서 되시죠. 다데네 딩시 스파스 가소래 딩시 냠네 14로 담으잖아요. 는 단대양라 주니 룩중도 권에 아니 거주림 도림 그다네 과된샤인 거야래. 근데 아니 랑제가 되버지. 대내 심지 친루 신학이 냠네 디디 다 신람버시 친루나 투자다 디디 아니 전주스 배태거지 바로도 집에 두 바로도 집에 대배 장승 대배 냠네 디제 다데네 하이 nenzo 고민도 자네 아니 저주기 두제 패배원도 제배이나 아니 다 저주도 산담니 랑니 다 저도 될래 수 아니 시소 무줄래야 되지기 로나 숨기야래 자다들 인도산에 아니 지야 아니 오버 다 요가 디디 냠린치야 디디 준비 봐다 간다 타이는 저 서도 되게 하래 되네네 개바 마요가 롱어느 요가 스잔에 저롱이 냠린 디레인 거야 되네네 저거 어디 요가 스르잔에 에네 리버 상대게 다 냠린 디치야디 자 도스네 강사지 디드 삼월로 먼저 추두체니 태버를 뭐 고갈로 다 냠린 시야지 요도가 나는 롱진 주도 나리야 단 제리네 다 사비샤요리 넘중에디 셰디 다 롱진 주든기 냠리 서울베다 타som 공부 제윤도 냐로 dum든저 되네 야오리스기 dum든저디 때 아니 이신저디 때 anything else, of course, singing as the or a shakacheni or a shabuta shishera. Do you want the chavina? The dig that minimum down roka jari, the che. And the name begin, texons, chins, that the in Yaman declaration.
So, so when we speak about 9 yanas or 9 vehicles from the early translation tradition's perspective, it's not a question of simply making a presentation about the general teachings of the Buddha, but in fact there is a tradition where the teachings of all the 9 yanas, 9 vehicles, are made relevant to the progress of an individual who is working on the path. So in this respect, then all the teachings of the 9 vehicles become relevant to the transformation of an individual person, a practitioner. So in this context, then the teachings and the practices of the 4 Noble Truths correspond to the teachings of the disciples' vehicle. And then when the teachings of the 4 Noble Truths are further elaborated, then the 4 Noble Truths, the causal networks between suffering and origin and cessation of the path, when they are further elaborated, then the teachings of the 12 links of dependent origination becomes relevant. And here, both the reversal order and the sequential order of the relationship between the 12 links are explained and then meditated upon. Then the practitioner is essentially implementing the teachings of the Pratyeka Buddha, the self-enlightened ones. And then when the individual moves on to the next stage, then the teachings on generating bodhicitta and the altruistic awakening mind, and based upon that implements the practices of the 6 perfections, giving a moral discipline and so on, culminating in the cultivation of shamatha, tranquil abiding, and also vipassana, a special insight. Then the practitioner is implementing the teachings of the Bodhisattva vehicle. On that basis, then one moves on to the next level, where deity yoga practices are brought into one's daily practice. And then, depending upon the levels of one's experience, the deity yoga practice becomes ever more subtler. And that's how one moves through these next 3 vehicles. And initially, for some individuals, it is said that the Kriya action tantra meditation may involve visualizing one's meditation deity in the form of a master outside, and then from whom one receives blessings and empowerments and so on. But gradually, as the deity yoga realization becomes more and more profound, one moves on to the next stages. And then finally, one moves on to the Mahayoga and Anuyoga and Adiyoga. Then there, the manipulation of the subtle energies and the channels and the drops, these practices, the more advanced Vajrayana practices, are also brought into the person's path. And then all of these, having established as a kind of a preliminary practice, one then moves on to the Dzogchen, the great perfection, Ati yoga practice, where the focus is really on affecting the realization of the Rigpa, primordial awareness. Therefore, when and this is in fact the approach that is presented in the 7 treasuries of Longchenpa, for example. And in fact, I normally recommend to people who wishes to engage in the great perfection practice to proceed by first study Longchenpa's treasury on the philosophical systems, Drupta Zu, and then follow that with the treasury of wish-fulfilling jewel, Yishin Zu, and then on that basis also study Semying Elso, the mind at ease, which there is a custom of doing the study and practice of this over a period of 145 days. So if each of the meditation cycles Yes. So each of these rounds of visualization, practice cycles are correlated to a day or week, and then there is a custom of doing this over an extended period of time in one stretch. That would be beneficial. And then gradually one can move on to the study of the treasury of the Supreme Vehicle, and then the treasury of ultimate expanse. And in this way, the approach would be very systematic. So the point is, it is very important to have an overall understanding of the basic framework of the Buddhist path. So, of course, there could be an individual circumstances where some individual practitioners may have residual karmic forces, being brought from the previous lives, and then, in a sense, they are connecting with what is, moving on from already a certain stage. In which case, a very specific instruction from an experienced guru or a master may be an appropriate approach. But generally, for most practitioners, it is better to approach from the basis of having an overall understanding of the structure of the Buddhist path, and then engaging in specific practices on that basis.
Then next, Gelug. Gelug lineage mainly come from Naropa. At the Lama Marba, or Tibetan, he received teaching from many Indian masters, and particularly his sort of what's the Madhyamaka philosophy is concerned from Mittippa. So very clear, the Mittippa is the holder of the Jantakiti's view, like that. Then the Gelug Chakja Chambu, Sunzane, Chakja Chambula, Gelug Chakja Sunguyare. That is Chakja Donga Nietzsche. Dochangbe on the Chakja Chambu. This is all in the Umedal Kongoshigare. Dagata Chakja Shisachi, the one, the Nezu Dream Guyare, Choyum Guyare. That Tumumoim, but they not were said the dream. Naru Churugange, Vesakomiatua. Oh, that Teda, that Tea Yamni Della, any Chakja Chambosa, Mahamudras at the tree.
So
that's also the Numatenji Lotini, that Nanjo more game Guyare. Lamjingo game Guyare.
So one of the key teachings of the Gelug tradition is the Mahamudra Teachings. And although Mahamudra Teachings can be found also in the Gelug school as well, but in Gelug teachings, Mahamudra is the essential instruction. And when we speak of the term Mahamudra or the Great Seal, this can be applied in the context of Sutra teachings and also in the Vajrayana Tantric teachings. When it is used in the Sutra context, then Mahamudra refers to meditation on emptiness, particularly emptiness. And however, in the Gelug teachings, when the term Mahamudra is used, it's being used in this Vajrayana sense, where the key point is to really utilize the innate mind of clear light into a realization of the nature of mind. And so the emphasis is really on the cultivation and development and also a realization of this innate mind of clear light.
Tajane Satya Brubane Majuni 다 넘겨한다 사제 남제 소야 돼. 다 데뷔 다 규디 상하가 냠는디 깨도 그냥시도 제네 다 숨도가 제니 다 능숨 유숨스 자 능숨 써야 되게 노람지 숨겨야래 나 용문배 나와 마타배 나와 되는 내저벌 타배 나와 전 숨샤 나와서 디 냠네 나라 다 안데 이게 안데 닝메 안다 년도 랑게 창심 디디 냠네 나다 탄디 창대요래 다전에 뒤에 오버 요가 디디 미스 순둥케다 말셰 다전에 nga lamegi da ma anu atisa da de chodi da de saye de songyundu ene gyusum sen da na lamegi kanro de do lamegi da de naga chujare gyusum se de dagi anda sangdu kan long chaya de gyugyu tabgyu debugus 다 규숨 세바 세안디 다다 시기 말아줘라 여여봐 다 저번집에 죽네 아니 리버군도 상보스 송샤야 단디 야 냠니 정당 도스면 용도 가버래 어디서 단지 저냥 도스다 도스면 용부지 이내다 강법 없었디 사회 터두기 내디 집버리샤 제니 다 규규 대 뭐였어 냠욕도 하는 거 어쩌시지 다 될래야 되도와 아도 사뱅송이 뭐예요 똑본 것이 손점수 어세 규미쳐도 잘했어야지 다 될래야 군시 규규了 아니 질 남도라 차라 니체 다 차라 니스체에 남도 처무티 뒤안데 이시적이야 말에 제니다 말한저다 똑본 것이 산성수세하게 나도 그규 창신 공백을 이나야 그규 창신도 길루그 창신 공백을 찍버리 냐라 ngandeji jemijus any maumbae maumbe chejar je tongbe ngumsus 다들에 ngar게 참바디에 바까 천유기 즉 똑같이 봐 결모 조세 마음배 남도 찾고 막 가서 봐 까지 다들 쉐바 소마 맞춰봐 대가 가나 산이로다 조서셔제 제윤도 남도 참으실래 되겠다 또 참으지 또 차라 니세가 또 참으서 들지 거래 다 저번 침배야 리버군도 상보병 어떠든 어쩌면이나 얘는 추구사지 송야지 요래 근시다 추구 현지야지 다 안데 대안의 현지기에서 말해 지단달로 또 차와지냐 그래서 달로 대강도 로 네트 체체 네트 체니 제베이나 안다 자베르 부치 측송내대 나리야 해대와로 상탈에 제송돼야 돼. 다 안데 쌤 해대 줘야 돼. 쌤 해대 줘세. 남도신다 각 케이프게 깨를 못 주시네. 다대 셔봐 소만 맞춰 봐. 즉 재미 정중 후벌 도시하제. 다 디간에 아니 일본 어체야. 저진이나 일본 어체야. 나디 진로 파보 쓴다 간다 지 진로든 저 단에 아니 일본 어체야지 다 연구해야 돼. 다 안들디 군시 규규 뭐 송윤도잖아요. 다 어디는 셈 차와. 다들 누구 현지집에 사람도 말해 돼. 이내다 왜세 디릭디날레 거보다. 대한도 조진날이야. 르버도 릭셔니체. 루브르 셈디도 사mol로 릭셔체. 가자. 루브르 셈디디 리베 째체. 리베 째나 용서로라. 다 루브르 셔바 사mol로 리베 째체. 리베 째려 돼. 근데 인도산에 리베 째데 참절로래야 릭셔 켜져. 근데 인도산에 리벌이야 뭐르버 시르버 째지르버 되는 먹고서도와 자 다른 가서 루브르에 독서 뭔도 들으신배 겁라야 대탐절로 리베 째레 샷데 스타인드산에 대다라 릭셔 켜요. 릭셔 켜요 인도 난조베 라 유민등의 냠용부터 하네 뇨몽모도 주변내걸래 뇨몽기 거라 지기 단 진단적인 뇨몽을 쳐그래 된데보다 뇨몽지 민노적인 뇨몽사디 민노적인 뇨몽사도 깨인르잖아요 그 미베 제수 민장와 뇨몽 대개 정신 터도 왜세 디간이야 로파 네트 체제 다 진베 제수 민장와 뇨몽 현지 계배 랑당지 인신제라 코랑게 정신 터도 뇨몽 현지 계배 랑운 tel야 저 정수로 심버지도 대변이나 아니 뇨몽 마바 나수 탁셔야 될 내용도가 이게 되셔 라라고 야말다 나 도스체니 또 디는 신체는 안 된디 해대 semjo야 다디 다네 아니 가사 좋지 야라 군시 규규 라바 남도 참문디 뭐시비체 다 디니 아니 난조도 깨는도잖아요 시규 람규 디세베서 셔서 텔라 제주기 추금 아제샤네 요르잖아요 기술 세베서 주면 되게 인주 상아 라미 지스 상아가 학계 요르잖아요 돈이 더 손을 하셔와서 송도 와 양걸 하버는 정도 나 라미기 돈이 더 손을 하셔서 전에 돈이 떡지게 로데 라버루브르 로데 마임바 뉴물 해지게 왜세 또 왜에 관해 왜세 뭐 쓰잖아요 칠시 장배 고엔 저거 말해 왜세가 넘버 로리에 샤워체네 된대기 왜세 뉴물 해지게 티 동번이 가서다 똑바로 매니 디니 신나가 나버려 샤데 버지 저도 와. 자 근데 인도 돈이도 손을 할 샤르셔야 돼. 기도 오메가 그 손다데다. 라메가 손다데 맨다 차티샤. 단다데 맨다래. 자다 도디님 누구 세지게 왜서 코레가로 산드는 것도 와. 학계에 그도네. 다 되네. 림베기 조림기 가봐. 야 레이드잖아. 다 롱숨을 내줬는데 다 저런 틀리를 내줬는데 냠는데 때네. 루브르에 셈디디마 팔라샤 팀. 아니 지정기 루브르에 셈디마 가서 우리 그게 액티브 매버 차베 서디 아니 차 롱슨디디 액티브야 차야지. 두스도 되도 와. 나도 조진걸이나 라보 루브에 롱슨디 숙천문고도 주변 내가 올라야 릭시에 캡데 여배 있는데 냠용게 심바 있나 릭베 못 쳐야지 릭베 랑소 쓰면야지 송겨야래 다 안다 상아 살매걸이나 왜세 땅바 하베 내가 때당 루브르에 셈던 데베 내가 릭베디 전에 무슨체 루브르에 셈디데 가베 지 릭베디 송 왜세 디송 어제 인도산에 저런 틀리냐면들이 응원을 하고 야 되네 이 말이 저땅도 지면
사제
사제 한다 다들 셀동 순주 송돼야 돼 셀와 셈지 천이 동바 셈지人心 셀동 순주 절제是送下的나한테 근시 교육의 콘데 람숨 상화레스 디 상루 그래랬을나 근시 규규데 코르웨 처탐제 체닉 주도 상 순두전에 다다 규규스는 안다 가서 올라변데 그러 봤다 탐해변데 그러 봤다 근데 이번 인도산에 대라 코르웨 처탐자로 뭔도 규니 예배 인도산에 체닉 주도 상스 다 람기 똑바디디 연된 주도 상스 땅고 변한 거는 대바 지지시실로 돼야 동료도 실업 지지시실로 돼야 다가는 신기지 다 있는 저 지수시설로 돼야 중국에는 되게 달고 시바디간에고 용루제도가 시바디간에 용되기도가 다다다네 전부씩 레이고를 받고 요원주대 정도가 되는 인도산에 람기 가서 람기 취탐제 연된 수도 상 또서가 연대디디 중국 수도 상스 중국 이런 수도 상스 어디서 자 저는 인도산에 근시 규규 컨대 열매 송샤다 대간 레기도와 자자 어디 되셔다 저 다的다들 내시면 다 가다 용을 sorry now too long no
so the Sakya tradition traces its the lineage of its instruction to the Indian master Virapa or Virvapa, and the key instruction of the Sakya school is known as the Lamdre cycle of teachings, path and its fruits, and path and its fruition teachings, Lamdre teachings, and these Lamdre cycle of teachings are principally based upon a cycle of Vajrayana text known as the He Vajra Tantra. And the key idea in that cycle of teachings is the notion of three types of continuum, and referred to as the three tantras. And one is the causal tantra, the basis of all. And then the causal tantra, the explanation of the causal tantra and the instruction based upon this is presented in the form of what are known as the three appearances and also three tantras. The three appearances here correspond to the non-Vajrayana teachings. For example, the teachings deal with what are known as the perspectives of afflicted mental states, cleansing of the afflicted mental states, perspectives, the teachings corresponding to the cleansing of the impure perspectives or impure appearances, and then finally cultivation of the pure appearances. So these correspond roughly to the external teachings, such as the teachings of the disciple vehicle, the self-enlightened one's vehicle, and the Bodhisattva vehicle. And however, the central focus of the teaching is really on understanding and cultivation of the qualities of this basic causal tantra, the Kunshi Gyugyu. And so there is in the Sakya Lamdre teaching an explanation of a method of a practice where the three tantras are brought into some kind of mixture or fusion. And so this and the idea of the basic causal tantra is analogous to this idea of fundamental innate mind of clear light, which in the Dzogchen terminology is referred to as the basic awareness that is the Samantrabhadra, the primordial mind. And so, however, the instruction for bringing about a realization of that basic causal continuum is done through an experiential process in the Sakya school. For example, Sakya Pandita makes the statement that he says that in between the arising of different thought processes, the arising of a clear light mind, a radiant clear light mind, remains uninterrupted. So what he is saying is that, for example, if you observe the mind, your own thought processes one follow after another as if in a kind of a sequence, but in between the arising of one thought and the dissolving of that and arising of another, there are interval, regardless of how short they may be, but there are intervals between the transitions of different thought arising of thought processes, and so the practice involves trying to tease out those transitional periods so that one can recognize and these gaps in the arising of another thought and dissolution and arising of another thought. And so this is done through a cultivation of a particular meditation practice, which is found also in the Gelug and the Kagyu Mahamudra teachings as well, where one seeks to cultivate an ability to simply focus on the present moment of consciousness. So this involves deliberately refraining from chasing after any thoughts that look back retrospectively into some kind of memory or recollections and so on, nor chasing one's mind after some kind of future anticipatory experiences, some kind of future directed oriented thought processes. So one refrains from both looking backwards into the past nor into the future through anticipation and hopes and so on, but remains simply in the present moment. So initially what one experiences is simply a kind of an absence or a gap, but through experience, as one learns to prolong that period of this absence, of the simply remaining focused in the present moment, at that time one comes to recognize the subtle thought processes. And this is, although not exactly the actual clear-light state of mind, but it is somewhat belonging or indicative of that basic clear-light mind. And for example, in the Dzogchen teachings, it is through this kind of practice one cultivates what is called a sense of wonderment, simply being aware of the present state and just remaining in that state with a total wonderment and a sense of wonder. And then from this sense of wonder, one leads to a real experience of Rigpa awareness. So this is what Dzapedul Rinpoche, for example, explains. So in the Sakya Lamdre cycle of teachings, although that kind of language is not used, but the basic idea is to really cultivate that present moment awareness with a sense of wonder, where one does not let one's mind follow after the temptation of looking into the past or into the future, but simply remaining in that present moment of consciousness. As one learns to remain simply focused on the present moment of consciousness, then one allows for the natural quality of the mind to express itself, and the natural quality of the mind is clear light. So this is the instruction that is found in the Sakya cycle of teachings. Now, of course, in the Dzogchen Great Perfection teachings, there is a recognition that even when the gross levels of thought processes are occurring, like when, for example, when a strong afflicted state of mind arises, even at that point, given that all of these mental processes are in some sense expressions of this basic Rigpa awareness, and they are referred to as effulgences or expressions or manifestations of Rigpa awareness. Therefore, even the most afflicted state of minds are permeated by the quality of a basic quality of awareness. So in Dzogchen Great Perfection instructions, there is a technique where while the afflicted state arises, one learns not to follow after the grasping and clinging that normally tends to arise with these afflicted mental states. So while when the afflicted mental state arises, one refrains from falling after the grasping tendency, but rather maintains one's focus simply on the bare awareness dimension of that experience, and through this way affect the actualization of the Rigpa awareness. So this is a unique method found in the Great Perfection teachings, whereas in the New Translation School teachings, the principal approach is to utilize various techniques to withdraw the grosser levels of mind and energy, and so that the subtler levels of consciousness and energy can become more manifest. Because when the sensory and the thought processes are active, then the subtler level of consciousness remains inactive, and through manipulation of the physiological forces such as the channels and the energy that flows within them and the drops and so on, one learns to withdraw both grosser level of consciousness and the energy, and then allow for the subtle levels of consciousness to arise. So that's the principal approach found in the New Translation School. So this is, in fact, one of the key approaches of the Sakya School of Teaching, where it talks about the union of clarity and emptiness. And here, clarity refers to the clear light, and emptiness to the emptiness quality. So in this, it says that the clarity is the defining characteristic of the nature of mind, and emptiness is the ultimate reality of mind. And through the union of the two, one attains the realization. And also this kind of practice teaching is also referred to as the indivisibility of Nirvana and Samsara, because in this basic causal continuum, all the attributes of both Samsara and Nirvana are present. All the attributes of Samsara, the cyclic existence, are present in the form of actual characteristics that we experience. And all the attributes of the path are present in the form of qualities of the mind, and all the attributes of the result are contained in the form of potentials. So therefore, this Kunshin Gyugyu, the basic causal tantra or continuum, is understood to be a form of an indivisibility of both enlightenment and unenlightened state.
Okay. So perhaps some question. Already here?
Your Holiness, these questions were submitted through the internet.
Yes.
And Professor Cabazon handed them to me. The first question is, in my reading of some of His Holiness's books, I have sometimes seen the subtlemost nature of mind characterized as neutral. But in other instances, it seems as though His Holiness says that we have an innate predisposition for goodness, for love, for compassion, and for enlightenment. So this would seem to imply that the fundamental nature of mind is positive or virtuous, but not neutral. Can Your Holiness please explain?
In generally, of course, we are not talking about ultimate reality or subtle mind. As far as subtle mind is concerned, this moment, just a word. So our basic sort of human nature, the way, I think in afternoon session, I think I may explain something.
Okay.
So those people who will not come
this afternoon,
the next session, then you can ask someone who attends.
Second question, Your Holiness. Is there some reason to prefer meditation on the nature of mind to meditation on anything else? For example, meditation on the nature of self or other phenomena?
Kasa, Simgal.
Simply the Gomez. The Gomez, the Penayam Metabogobotan, Dame Bogomba, de Gombala, Le Tare, the Damgoeg, Nega Kainas.
That's mainly to refer in tantric teaching, tantric practice. The reason is, as I mentioned at the beginning, ultimately things depend on our motivation. Motivation is part of mind. So therefore, penalty kasa chuti. Simni jini, simjin jiglen dang, nuji jiglen shi na zo ge. Dawa mo lu le le kieba so samani le ji yema ins.
So, for example, in one Buddhist text, Chandrakirti, 7th century, he says that it is the mind that creates the world that we live in, and it is the mind that creates the actions that lead to that creation. And therefore, in this way, we understand the karmic action to be the causal agent for creation.
Da anda tagi sadong sungju sa rigdong yerme dadong yerme sa gejtwa. Di chuni bachibare di da bana sadong sungju sa rigdong yerme sa dongni di mashi pumbe de dongni da ben gazore ben yugude dongni da dongni imbe ngone jigbare di ine 최전 싸워다 뭐 예매도 들어왔으니 그런 게 신이 상당 걸로. 안다디 랑기 랑신디 랑기 다 가서 우리 보게 또배 주지 못 되는지. 자, 근데 인도산에 셈지 춘이 가는 상담 모두 믿어봐. 그런 예매 상담 오마티. 자, 근데 인도산에 베나도 사운드 아리안 대회 림면 나한테 송야래 심지 춘이 도와야 돼 시우지 개치 뭐 이마지 콘데 싸워들에서 송야 어디 나한테 시고 다 누르네 샤베이나 제단변에 다하게 최전의 내기 다 전부 또 나와 예배 차네 도마 가사가 담고 되네 최지 담고 공사 지점 송야래 나 라면데 되는잖아요 인심이 심지 듣고는 용어도 저거 샤베.
So, therefore, we have been for example, we have been talking about the union of clarity and emptiness, union of Rigpa awareness and emptiness, a union of bliss and emptiness. So all of these are really perspectives coming from the Vajrayana teachings. And therefore, in Vajrayana teaching, the meditation on emptiness, on the mind itself, the nature of mind itself, becomes very important. Because although one can take the emptiness of, say, an external object like a sprout and meditate upon it. But the distinction here is that when one takes the mind to be the basis upon which one meditates on emptiness, then one is actually reflecting upon the nature of one's own mind, the ultimate nature of one's own mind. And all of this is really from the perspective of Vajrayana teaching. For example, in one of Aryadeva's texts on Tantra, he explains the significance of taking a mind, the nature of mind, as the focus of one's practice in the Vajrayana context. However, in a non-Vajrayana context, such as the perfection of wisdom teachings, then generally it is said that between the emptiness of the person and emptiness of phenomena, one generally takes the emptiness of person to be the initial focus, because it is easier to understand emptiness by taking one's own personal identity or person to be the basis of meditating upon emptiness.
One sort of the Sanskrit word usually we recite, that is Om Shunada Jnana Banza Sumava Emakohang. These Sumava say Rangshi Saishwa. Or that the Kang Gumju Nelu the Chishem Korang Rangshimba.
So in this mantra that is part of the Vajrayana sadhana practice, there's the word svabhava, which means nature. And svabhava in this particular context indicates meditating upon the svabhava of the mind itself, the very mind which is meditating upon its own nature.
그래서 옴 숨바와 슈도 사와 담아 숨바와 슈도 항세하게 숨바와 세야되다 옴 슈는데 자나마도 숨바와 세 가가리 된다 가가리도.
So the svabhava in these two different contexts are different. One is svabhava of the nature of all phenomena, whereas in another context, svabhava or nature refers to the nature of the mind meditating upon itself.
Yeah. Next.
I'm wondering if you think it is a lot more difficult for Americans to focus their minds and to be able to reach enlightenment.
그래서
that similar that sim nail to pop sim that focus chair the kang chair metros and things are the kanda to be le kang chair metros chiche. We are a culture that thrives on stimulation, excitement, pleasure, and doing everything very quickly. I think that meditation and centering oneself is extremely difficult in American society. Do you think it would be easier for Americans if we lived in a country with a slower pace, where people took more time being present in their daily life?
Basically, I don't think there's much differences, whether Easterner or Westerner. I don't think much differences. In fact, some of my American friends who spent years of meditation, said their result quite amazing. So these are American, not Tibetan. so that shows basically same human mind. As the external influence important, but ultimately the nature of mind itself is more important. So we everyone have sort of same potential, and I think because of the same mental quality. I think like that. That's how I feel. But then someone, I think this questioner, if you're really serious, then thorough investigation, interview more people, then maybe you get more clearer picture. I don't think it's much differences.
Final question.
I think 2-3 questions.
Okay. Why did you say Buddhism is like a science of the mind?
That word not originally come from me, but some Western scholar, describe. Buddhism is not a religion, but rather a science of mind. So ask them. Yes.
How do you feel about the use of LSD and other psychedelic drugs to attain higher states of consciousness or spirituality?
Of course, firstly, I have no such experience. Then according to those people who have some experience, then it seems
But from what I have heard from people who have had the actual first-hand experience, it seems that the experience of using these kind of psychedelic drugs tend to bring a greater profusion of illusion. And since we already have a lot of illusory experiences to begin with, so why do we need additional illusory experiences?
Then next. I think, you see, in serious practice is concerned, I think should not rely on external substances. Just to simply try to
cultivate the mind.
Cultivate
the mind,
the nature quality of mind. That's much better.
And a happy heart.
That answer is to come later.
In the afternoon. In your 50 years of exile, you have faced down many hardships and never wavering in your commitment to your people and the fight for social justice. What advice do you have for young people on how to achieve success while staying true to one's moral principles?
Afternoon.
So most of the questions are more general.
Now stop.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.